Be'ezer Hashem, talk a little bit about Yom Kippur, Yom HaKadosh, the holy day of Yom Kippur, and to think about what is the essence of the quality of what Yom Kippur is. So the simple definition of Yom Kippur, the straightforward definition of Yom Kippur, that it's a day of atonement, a day of slicha, a day of complete atonement. The origin of the story of Yom Kippur goes back to the times of after the breaking of the luchos, after the breaking of the tablets, 40 days after the giving of the Torah, because of the episode with the golden calf, and the tablets are broken, and Moshe goes up another middle 40 days, and then he finally comes down at the final 40 days. He ascends the mountain on Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of Elul. That's the custom. We blow the shofar on Rosh Chodesh Elul to take note of that event of Moshe ascending the mountain to receive the second tablets, the second luchos. And when finally Moshe comes down, and Vayim Hashem salachti kedvarecha, Hashem says that the people are forgiven, he descends on the 10th of Tishrei, and that's the day he comes down with the second luchos, the second tablets, and that's the day that becomes the day of atonement. And Hashem atones, and it's the day of Atzuma Shel Yom, the essence of the day, with tshuva, without tshuva, that's an argument, but the essence of the day brings atonement. That's the essential story of Yom Kippur. So there's a few things that we have to understand this deeply. Is number one, when the luchos were given for the first time, which was given on the day that we received the Torah, that day in the Torah itself is not marked. Now we know that Shavuos, which is 49 days after going out of Mitzrayim, after going out of Egypt, on the 50th day, we received the 50 or 51st day, we received the Torah, and that's the day that we mark as Shavuos. But if you look at the Torah itself, in the 5 books of Moshe, in the Chumash, does not say that Shavuos is a time that we celebrate the giving of the Torah and the receiving of the first luchos. It's not mentioned. We know that it is that day, and that's partially the reason why we celebrate Shavuos, but that does not say in the Torah. The Torah tells us that, for example, we celebrate Pesach because that's the time that we left Egypt. We celebrate the celebration of Sukkot because that's the time period when the spring began, when the fall began, and the winter began, that we started sitting in tents, or because the return of the clouds of glory that happened after Yom Kippur. But either way, that was a time period. That time period is when we received, whether the clouds of glory literal, whether the Sukkot is Sukkot mamish, but it's literal Sukkot booths, like the opinion of Rabbi Kiva or the opinion of Rabbi Blazer, different gersais, different versions. The idea of literal booths or return of the clouds of glory, but it has to do with that time period. With regards to the celebration of Shavuos, the Torah doesn't tell us that it's for the receiving of the Torah. Yom Kippur, the Torah does tell us that it is the day of atonement. And that's the day that Moshe came down from the second luchos, B'yom Chasanasai, when it says that it's the day of the wedding day. Chazal said B'yom Chasanasai. The day of the wedding is Zum an Torah. This is the receiving of the Torah. Where it says in Tainus, what is the receiving of the Torah? Luchos Shniyos, like Rashi writes, that's the second tablet. So we celebrate the giving of the second luchos, but we don't celebrate, or not overtly celebrate, the giving of the first luchos. This is one thing that we need to understand. The second thing is also very strangely and kind of odd, that the sequence of the Yom Tov and the sequence of the holidays seem to be out of order. So Rosh Hashanah is the Yom Adin. Rosh Hashanah is the time of judgment, which we spoke about many times. That's the time that we receive the download on the first day for the spiritual, the second day for the spiritual, for everything that we're going to receive in this coming year in potential. And then every single day we draw it down from the potential, from the klal into the prat, from the principle into the detail, through our prayers and through our actions. But it's sort of put into the bank, so to speak, and every day we can cash and take out money from that bank, from that account. That's the Yom Adin. That's the day of judgment. 10 days later is the day of atonement, which is the time of forgiveness. Now, in sequence, it would seem to be out of order. We would imagine that if a person was about to be judged and they have done something wrong, and they're going to be judged for the thing that they have done wrong, you would assume that a person would come in front of the court, in front of the judge, and first regret and do tshuva, and say that regret, and they accept upon themselves to do the things differently from now on for the things that they have done, and therefore they desire and they're asking for a more lenient judgment. But it doesn't make any sense for first to have judgment and then to do tshuva, and then to do regret and remorse for things that were done in the past and acceptance for the things that the way you're going to do in the future. It should have first been Yom Kippur. First, you should cleanse yourself of the things that are negative, and you should attain some level of atonement and clarity and cleanliness. And then you should ask to be judged. Why is Rosh Hashanah come before Sukkot? Before Yom Kippur? This is another question. So these two questions, these two ideas are interrelated. The first luchos, the receiving of the first luchos, the first tablets, which were received 50 days after leaving Mitzrayim, which would reach the 50th level of purity. Therefore, it's the day that Cheres is the day of freedom from the Yetzer Hara, freedom from Malach HaMavos, freedom from death, that's the state of immortality. We reached a high level, spiritual level, very quickly, because we were 49 levels of impurity, but we reached a very high level very quickly. We swung from one state to the other state. But what we received was gifted to us. It was not something that we earned. It was shameful bread because we didn't deserve it. Halal avodah zarah, halal avodah zarah. We were idol worshippers, and so were the Egyptians. But we were thrust out of Egypt, taken out of Egypt quickly, and it represents a state where a person receives something and they're not equipped to receive it, or not only they're not equipped to receive it, but they didn't earn it. It's shameful bread, meaning it's bread, a bread of shame. It's naman ksufa. It's something that was given to you, even though you didn't earn it. Or to say it a little differently, the first luchos, the first tablets, represents the wholeness that exists from birth. It's a type of wholeness that you're gifted into. You're born into that state of wholeness. In the womb, you receive the entire Torah. You enter this world in a place of Gan Eden, in an idyllic state, hopefully. And you have this sense of wholeness. Of course, you're very young, or if we're talking about this in terms of a child's maturity. The first state of wholeness when you were as a child, hopefully you had a good childhood, and that's the wholeness that comes before any type of brokenness, for any type of real traumas that a person experiences throughout life. And then a person lives and goes through life. And sometimes, things don't work out exactly how a person expected them to work out. Or sometimes a person actually goes through real traumatic experiences. And there's some measure of brokenness, maybe just even the brokenness of the sense of absence, and the sense of longing and yearning, and a sense of existential loneliness or brokenness. But a person sometimes goes through in life, or actual real hardships that a person goes through, God forbid, a divorce or a death. A person experiences the brokenness of life. That represents the broken tablets. And then there's a type of wholeness that is reached through the brokenness. There's a type of collecting of the pieces that a person gathers up these pieces of brokenness, which I'll explain in a moment what this means, but picks up the broken pieces and creates the Luchas Shniyos, creates the second tablets, which is not something that was received and given to us as a form of bread of shame, just gifted to us, sort of like winning the lottery, which you don't work on and just receive. And most times people squander what they receive, and even worse, it actually ruins them because it's something that they didn't work on. Versus the second Luchas, which is represented on the idea of Yom Kippur, is that we fell. Collectively, this is the story of Klal Yisrael, the story of the people of Israel in the desert, is that they go through these experiences. There's a story of the golden calf, and there's a lot of death, and there's a lot of hardship. And then they do tshuva. They return, They recalibrate their lives. They realign themselves with the will of the Creator, with the deepest will of who they are. And there's a ingathering of the broken pieces that creates, so to speak, the second luchos, which is received on Yom Kippur. But this is a co-joint process, because now it's not something that's just given to us as a gift, but it's something that we created. Moshe carves the luchos. In other words, Moshe, the representative of the people, is the one that's carving these luchos. It represents the wholeness, the Torah, the emergence of wisdom that comes, and chachma that comes with Makom HaChoshech. The light that emerges precisely from within the place of the darkness, that in the place of the brokenness, and the brokenness is brought back together and made whole again, and that's a higher level of light that's received. This is, there was a famous Hasidic Rebbe, Reb Zusha of Anipol, the great Hasidic Rebbe, that once on Yom Kippur turned to Hashem. People heard him speaking, and he said, "Rabbeinu Shalom, the Master of the universe." And he was listening to the people's prayers and the tefillas that they were having on Yom Kippur, and he said, "Where would you get such beautiful prayers if the people hadn't first fallen, if they first haven't sinned?" Because the prayers that they're singing, the songs that they're singing, the shir, the song that they're singing, which is a circle to bring everything together, is a much greater song, a much more beautiful song than the song of the perfection. There's a song of the wholeness of the perfection that comes about when a person's a child. It's like the songs that a child sings, which is very beautiful and sweet. And then there's the song of a person that sings after their brokenness and after the things and the hardships that they went through, and even the things that they perpetuated, the negative things that they perpetuated and did tshuva for. And now there's a connection or picking up of all the broken pieces and creating the song that's created from that place of darkness and from the place of the brokenness is a much more beautiful song. Now it has much more different octaves, and it functions at many different levels, meaning that the song has ups and downs and highs and lows, because that's life. But the song becomes so much more beautiful. It's not atonality. It's not just one sound, which is the sound of the tzaddik, the perfection that's given, the perfected song that's sung from a person that never experienced life yet, from the experience of a child, versus the song of an adult that brings back, that collects all the broken pieces and creates a harmonious sound from all those broken pieces. That's what a shir is. That's essentially what a song is. A song is a circle that creates a connection between picking up all those pieces and creating one great cycle of all those events, and understanding how all those events, the lows, were actually part of the highs, and the highs brought a person to a different low, which brought a person to a higher high, and to recognize this entire cycle of life. This is the higher level song of Yom Kippur. This is the highest song. This is the song of the second luchos. Now we can understand a little bit, try to understand in the context of what we asked before, why this first Rosh Hashanah, first the time of judgment, and then after the time of judgment, we're experiencing the time of atonement. Why? It doesn't make any sense. It seems to be illogical. And the principal answer is that there's a foundational teaching in the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. The Talmud brings it down at the end of the Sefer, which is that there are three hays, Hachna, Havdalah, Hamtaka. Or to say them in English, and to use also some type of way to remember them, there are three S's. Hachna is subjugation, Havdalah is separation, and Hamtaka is sweetening. So there are three stages in life. In any type of progress, in any type of movement that a person is going through, there are three stages. The first stage, and this is what we're talking about, a person is trying to transform and trying to grow. The first stage is if a person wants to grow in their life, they have to take responsibility for the actions that they have done. They have to take responsibility for their life. They cannot look at their life merely as being a victim of circumstances, a victim of a situational reality that created their life, that they're just in the effects of life, not the creator, but a person that lives fully and wholly. And a person that lives from a deeper place takes responsibility, takes the ability to respond seriously, and says that what has happened in the context of the cycle of the year, a person says what happened in the past year, the things that I've done, the things that happened to me, but my response to those things, I'm taking full responsibility for that. I created them. I created the response to them. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. And I take full responsibility. I own my shortcomings. I own the things that I have done. Because a person that doesn't own their shortcomings or what they have done, the person has done something, let's say, wrong, and says, okay, it was not me, or circumstantial, or I was just the effect of the thing, I was just the victim, therefore I reacted, then a person never grows. But a person that wants to grow, and wants to evolve, and wants to go deeper into their lives, and deeper into life itself, the first thing is, I own my past. I own the things that I've done. These are things that I created. That's hachna, that's subjugation. Subjugating yourself to the things that has been done, that you've created. That's the first step of spiritual, mental, and emotional growth. I own them. I created them. I own this. This is my life. I created it. That's the first step. And that occurs in the month of Elul. The Zohar says that the idea of wailing and crying for father and mother, which is the captive woman, that idea is the month of Elul. The month of Elul is, like Dari says, it's the month when there's a revealing of Yigimel L'Sarachim, which the Torah actually says, because the last 40 days, which we spoke about before, revealing of the 13 attributes of mercy. The Alter Rebbe gives the mashal, the famous metaphor of that is a Melech Basada, the king is in the field, which means that it's mundane reality, yet it's from the highest light of the Kesser, therefore it comes down into the world of the mundanity. And that's the process of Achna, where we're owning ourselves. The Sephardic community says Slichas, the Ashkenazic community says at least a few days before Rosh Hashanah or a week before Rosh Hashanah says Slichas, which is the idea of collecting my past and owning my reality, owning my past life, everything that happened to me. That's the first stage. That's the first step of tshuva. I own it. The trouble or the complication comes that could arise when a person takes full ownership of their past. Let's say a person cheated, for God forbid, or a person lied and said, "No, I lied. The truth is, I lied. I was not honest, and I own it, and I take responsibility for the fact that I lied, and I lied." The trouble is that it's possible the more a person takes responsibility for the things that they have done, the more they start identifying with it. David HaMelech says, "V'chatasi negdi samid." Chatasi negdi samid means my sins, my negativity is in front of me, but it's not it's not within me. Negdi means that I'm standing a little bit objective from it. The trouble is that sometimes when a person identifies with the things that they have done, because they're taking responsibility with that, they start thinking that they are that person. In other words, if a person lied or cheated, they start thinking that I am actually a cheater, I'm actually a liar. A person says, if I look back in the past year, for example, I lied multiple times, and I'm taking full responsibility. And then the person starts thinking to himself, well, if I lied so many times, I'm probably a liar. And that's a terrible, devastating way of thinking about yourself, because the moment you start thinking about yourself as a liar, not just a person that lied, you start identifying yourself as a liar, then there's no hope, because that's who I am, so I'm a liar. So how do I can't change myself, because that's who I am. So what needs to happen in the second stage is hachna, is avdallah, is separation. Which means separating means I separate the actions from the person. I recognize there were certain things that I have done, but that's not who I am. Who am I? I'm a truthful person. Who am I? I'm a good person. I'm a holy person. I'm a neshama. I'm a soul. This is Havdalah. This is radical Havdalah. Radical separation means I disassociate, in a way, the person from my action. I say I take full responsibility for that thing, but now I recognize that I am not that thing. I am not a liar. I did lie. Two separate stories, two separate ideas. Separate those two things. When a person separates these two things, they're able to extricate themselves from the fact that they lied and to actually act truthfully, because they're identifying themselves with the truthful person of who they truly are. They're saying, I'm a truthful person that lied. And therefore, because I'm a truthful person and I'm a good person and I have a soul, I have a neshama, that's truly who I am. That's my true identity. So the fact that I slipped and I did something wrong, that's not who I did. It's what I acted. So therefore I could take responsibility, but I separate myself and I recognize that I'm the good person. This stage of Havdalah, this stage of separation, is essentially the entire idea of Rosh Hashanah, the Day of Judgment. Because we enter into Rosh Hashanah with a radical form of tashlich, which is an Ashkenazic custom that emerges in Germany in the 1400s. The idea of tashlich means I'm casting aside my sins. I am saying that's not who I am. These are things that I've done. I have no association with them because I'm throwing them away. That's symbolic of the idea of tashlich. But the idea of Rosh Hashanah is that because I am identifying myself with my purity, I don't mention anything of negativity. On Rosh Hashanah, there is absolute zero mention of chet, of sin. There is no mention of things that I've done. There's no mention of things of accepting upon myself things for the future. There's zero mention of anything negative, because on Rosh Hashanah, I'm coming into Rosh Hashanah as a tzaddik, as my perfection, as my wholeness, that is completely severed from the things that I've done. There's the things that I have done, and I took responsibility for that, and that's the work that I did in the month of Elul. Comes Rosh Hashanah, I'm perfect. All I have is thoughts about life, and a Sifr Tzadikim, and I have the book of Tzadikim. Mentioned a few times that even the word, even egoism, we don't eat nuts, because egois is the numeric value of the word chet, of the word sin. But if you actually do the equivalent, there's another reason why we don't eat nuts, because it has to do with saliva. But another reason is, other reason that's given is because it has the same numeric value as the word for sin. But the word chet actually is not the same numeric value, because one egg is 17 and chet is 18. So even because chet, the aleph is silent. So, and the Baal Shem Tov says that the reason why the aleph is silent in a chet is because when a person sins, a person does something negative, there's a silencing of the alufa shalolim, of the creator that's not present there, or not revealed present there in the thing that a person is doing. So we don't eat something that's similar to the sounding, to a word that's similar sounding to the idea of what it means sin. So we have nothing to do with the world of sin. This is an absolute radical separation from anything negative. That's Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, there can be a perfect judgment. Therefore, we can enter Rosh Hashanah and be in the state of Rosh Hashanah and the state of perfection, because we're only thinking about our perfection. We're thinking about our soul. We're thinking about of the part of ourself that's perfect, of the wholeness of self. Like Abalafi speaks about this idea that there's a chatzi and a shalom. There's a part of self that's broken, a part of self that's full. We're on Rosh Hashanah. We're the conversation and the dialogue with self within self, and self with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the Creator, is the part of self that's whole. That's the higher, that's perfect, that's pure. And then comes the 10 days, that there's a closeness. And then comes finally Yom Kippur, the 10th day, world of Keser, Radla, the idea of the girl, the world, the place of like Yom Kippur, the highest level of not knowing, the highest levels that's revealed on Yom Kippur. Because what is Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is the ultimate ability and possibility of hamtaka, of sweetening. What does sweetening mean? I said before, the idea of the second luchas, that the idea of the second tablets was that it came after the place of brokenness, that it was a collection of the brokenness that was then brought into a context of a higher level of wholeness. So it was not a wholeness that existed prior to descent, but it's a wholeness that comes after the descent. It's not the perfect song or the pure song of a tzaddik. It's not the perfect song of the child, but it's a song, the song of perfection, a higher level of perfection that includes within it the brokenness, which is the sound of the Baal Tshuva. What is the idea of hamtaka? What is the idea of sweetening? Sweetening means like this. Whenever a person goes through any type of process of change and transformation, and people do go through processes of change and transformation throughout their lives, and sometimes things that a person has done when they're 16, 17, or they're a teenager, when they're 30 or 40, 50, 60, whatever old they are, they look back at those times that they did things when they were younger, and they look back and they say, I can't believe that I did those things. What was wrong with me? Why did I do those things? So what happens usually, or often, is that a person severs those parts of self. They let go of those parts of self because now they're much more serious, and they want to be much more responsible beings, and they want to be much more serious about their life. So they say the things that I've done when I was 16, 17 or younger are things that I need to let go, and now I need to be in a more mature state. You know, the greatest joy that a person experiences, there's a language from this in the Torah Aleph and Ramah, that the greatest joy is Ataras HaSveikas. Mitzvahs also writes this. The idea of Ataras HaSveikas means that there's a doubt, there's an uncertainty, and then there's a clarity that emerges from that uncertainty. Or the joy of finding something that's lost. And especially, sometimes a person loses something. Let's say you're looking for your glasses or your keys. And you frantically need your glasses, you frantically need your keys, and then you finally find it. It's joy because you lost something, then you found it. You wake up in the morning and you have your keys next to you for your car or your glasses. There's no joy. The joy comes from finding something that was lost. If this is true with external things, this is certainly true on a very much more deep level. This is true when there's a rediscovering of parts of self that you let go in the process of growth. The hamtaka, the sweetening or the atonement, what we're talking about in Yom Kippur, which is the highest level of sweetness, the highest level of joy, of pure joy. That's why Yom Kippur is l'chayosem b'rov, that there's life that comes through the fasting. Not fasting like to pain your body. Like Chazal says, Gemara says, because if you want to pain, there's other ways that you can pain your body. You can slap yourself. You can hurt yourself. But God forbid, we don't do that. It's lishbois, like the Rambam writes. The idea of resting. We rest. We transcend from the place of food. We transcend, like we spoke many times, from the veshet, from the place of the veshet, which is the place of the food pipe, which is connected to the word satan. Same letters, but the vav becomes elongated, like the Shalah writes, and therefore it becomes anchored and stuck. But we live from the place of the kana, place of the windpipe, the place of the hevel elyon, the higher level of breath, which is called bina. We're not longer in malchus, but the higher hay, which is Elam HaTshuva and Elam Haba, the world of Elam Haba. That's the place where there's a sweetening. Amtakas Adin is B'Sharshan. The sweetening of judgment occurs in its root, which is the world of bina, which is the hevel elyon, the divine breath, the Imei Allah, the breath, the mother of breath. This idea of Yom Kippur means it's like this, that on Yom Kippur, there is after we judgment and after we severed and after we owned and then we severed, there's a reclaiming of all those things that we have done in the past, but now in a very different context, in a holy way, in a sweet way. I'll give you a simple analogy to understand what this means. Is like this. Let's say a person lied, because we're using that example, in the past year. It comes the month of Tshuva, the month of Elul, and they take responsibility and say, I lied. It's a terrible thing. I lied. I shouldn't have lied. And they own it. Then they sever themselves from that lie. They say, I'm not a liar, I'm a person of truth, but I lied. So therefore, I'm not connected to that. The highest level of tshuva is doidas nasla kazachias, when the negativity themselves becomes like merit, when there's a transformation of the negativity itself. How do we transform the negativity itself? On one level, it means, because I recognize the things that brought me to the higher places, to the higher state of consciousness that I'm living in, is because of the things that I've done in my past. Okay, that's one example. But the deeper levels, take the thing in itself. What does it mean to take the thing in itself? And that's the sweetening, the finding the parts of self that I let go. That's the ultimate sweetening. Because when a person thinks about their life and says, okay, I cheated, let's say I lied, then a person has to ask themselves, why did I lie? Like what caused me to lie? What is the pleasure or the sensation that I have when I lie, for example? I'm using lying as an example, but what is this? What is the pleasure or the sensation that I have from it? It gives me a sense of power. It gives me a sense of self-worth. It doesn't really matter if it gives me a sense of aliveness. It gives me a sense that I'm clever. Whatever the sensation is, and any type of emotion, any type of thing that you did, there's always a thing that a person does, the actual physical act that a person is doing, but then there's also the sensation that a person is receiving from that act that prompts a person to do those things. There's certain type of pleasure that a person has, or a certain type of a sense of empowerment, or a sense of self-worth. There's something that is happening in those experiences that causes a person to do those things. Besides the fact of trying to get out of a situation. So maybe it's because I'm lazy and I don't want to figure out a better resolution. So it's a quick fix. Whatever the reason is, there's always something deeper, that there's some type of energetic experience that you're getting from the actual experience. So what a person needs to do in order to do proper tshuva, the highest level of tshuva, is not just, I lied, I regret that I lied, I take ownership that I lied, I have charata that I have regret that I've done, and I would never lie again, and I'm a kab myself, and azivas achet, and all the processes of actual tshuva, the general idea of tshuva, which is charata and kabbalah, regret and acceptance upon myself to do things differently. And then we say the second step, which is part of achna, that's part of the subjugation, the first step. And then the second step is avdallah. I'm totally separate from that. I'm not a liar. I don't do that. But then the ultimate idea is, true, you're not a liar, and you're not going to lie, but I want to sweeten that thing in itself, because I want to understand what is the sensation that I have or I had when I did those things. And maybe it's something that happened last year, or maybe things that happened in your youth. Either way, doesn't matter. Something in my past. What was the sensations that I was gaining then? That because I no longer lie, again, lie is just a metaphor using as an example, because I don't do those things anymore, there's something about myself that I've also let go of. There's a certain type of sensation that I'm not experiencing any longer because I don't do those things. There's a certain type of excitement or a certain type of empowerment or a certain type of pleasure. What is it that I lost because I gave up those particular negative ideas or negative things that I've done? And the ultimate sweetening is to draw back that same sensation, to figure out how could I bring that type of sensation into my life today, even though I'm not going to do those particular actions. How could I find those sensations within positive mitzvahs? And that's the ultimate transformation, because the ultimate transformation of self is the inter-inclusion of everything part of ourself in the context of the present moment. Not the letting go, but the reclaiming of everything that I had and that made me feel alive, maybe when I was younger, and maybe because I let go of those patterns of behavior, which they were negative because they were expressed in a negative way. How do I find that same sensations now when I'm older and more mature, and I already did the separation? I already own it and separated myself, and now I'm living my life in a different way. How do I draw that same sensation back into my life? And that will be the ultimate sweetening, and that's why it's the ultimate joy. Because it's a part of myself that I let go in the process of doing tshuva, in the process of trying to change my life. And that's very important, because in the process of trying to change your life, you need to become objective to your life. Because if you don't do the havdalah state, if you don't do the separation state, and you're still subjectively entangled with those particular actions that brought you those particular sensations, then you're just going to be stuck in the same rabbit hole of just doing those things over and over again. So the only way to actually able to reclaim those parts is if you go through the process of radical separation, which you don't look at your life anymore from a subjective place, but you're able to separate these two things, almost separate the sensation from the narrative, and able to look objectively at my past and say, objectively, I was, when I was a teenager or when I was experiencing these things in the past year, I felt very alive because X, Y, and Z. Even though the things that I did was absolutely negative, and I recognized that they're negative, and I took responsibility for those things, and I did tshuva for those things in the month of Elul, and I separate myself from that, and I said, that's not who I am. I'm a better person than that. I'm a holier person, and therefore, on Rosh Hashanah, I have a good judgment. It comes Yom Kippur and says, okay, so how do I reintegrate those parts? And in a context of holiness. And that's why the tshuva that we speak about on Yom Kippur, the process of transformation that we talk about on Yom Kippur, is not the same type of tshuva that we talk about in the month of Elul. The month of Elul is one level of tshuva, which is tshuva meira, and it's a lower level of tshuva. It's tshuva of taking full responsibility, owning it, regretting it, accepting upon ourselves to be different. But the tshuva Yom Kippur is the transformation itself of those same very sensations into the context of something that's pure. And the more we do this work on Yom Kippur, the more we feel elated, the more we feel whole again. This is what the Chazal say, the sages say. There's a medrash that says on the end of Yom Kippur, there's a heavenly voice, there's a baskal that says, Lech v'chol b'simcha lachmecha, ki kvar ratza, that you should know that go and eat your food with great joy, because your sins have already been forgiven. You're a forgiven person. So the Hasidic Rebbe's asked, how do we hear this Paschal? And the answer is we do. Because when it comes towards the end of Yom Kippur, towards Ne'ilah, and we feel elated, we feel whole again, we feel lighter, we feel more expansive. Physically, because we haven't eaten in 24 hours and we're more connected to the kana, to the windpipe, to the Hevel Elyon, and that's how we're receiving our nourishment from Olam Abinu. We're not connected to the world of Veshet, and that's not pulling us down to the world of food and to the world of the materiality, and feel a sense of transcendence. And we feel a certain sense of elation. That's when we're actually hearing, on a very deep level, our soul is hearing that perfect voice that says, it's okay, you've come home. And now you can go celebrate the Yom Tov of Sukkot. So we shall have a truly transformational, joyful, higher level of joy, not joy in a boisterous way of Purim, but it's the same energy, the same quality, the same Oil Makaseh, the same Oil Adel Yada, that same place that's beyond. But it's done in a much more serious and somber way. But that's that joy of somberness that we should experience Yom Kippur in its truest, highest, deepest form. And we shall all be zoche to have a Gemar Chesed Tova. We shall be inscribed and written for a year of life and goodness and health and all the brachas and all the blessings for all of us. B'Sech Klal Yisrael have a very meaningful Yom